All right, well, Chris Popper here. I'm joined with Dr. Marc Gousse, and we're doing this remotely. Um, so, uh, First of all, congratulations. Happy summer. It's not real summer vacation for you because you've got a lot on your plate this summer.
Yeah, Chris, we do. We have a lot of work to do, but that's we look forward to it because it's going to be able to build on trying to bring everybody back to school here.
Well, so let's talk about that. I know that the governor's got a task force working. The CDC is working on things. The Maine Department of Education has offered some preliminary guidelines. You've got a big task force that's working right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're all those things that you mentioned, Chris, are important, but we are so blessed in our region to have just the people and the resources we do. You know, from the bio lab to the Jackson lab to the hospital and all the subject matter experts. And I would be remiss, foolish, frankly, not to reach out and tap into some of those resources, which we have. So we've assembled a group that includes students, staff, support staff, teachers, administrators, board members, parents, scientists, medical experts, nurses, you name it. We tried to hit every interest group. And it's a daunting task, both with the size and the complexity of the group. But again, trying to touch all those buttons, it really is important to have those people at the table. And I just want to say, for the people that volunteered that we couldn't have because of the size of the group, hopefully we can bring some folks in and share the information. But in short, we have a very aggressive timeline. We literally have to come up with some decisions in August. If we think about school starting traditionally in August with our calendar, the planning and the logistics alone, by early August, we're going to need to be making some decisions or come close to them. So there's about 6 weeks of time. That's not a lot of time to come through and literally build the plane as you fly it. That's what we're talking about here. There is, and Chris, no matter what we do, no matter what decisions are made or recommendations, I'm confident there are going to be people that are not going to be happy, and there are going to be people that think, it's too much, it's not enough. And we're conscious of that going into it. The goal here really is to come up with things that would allow for the safe return to school for our students and staff. There are many scenarios. There's the possibility, dependent on the data and where we're at health-wise, of continuation of remote learning. Nobody wants to see that. There's the possibility of a full return with restrictions and safety protocols. And then there's the possibility of a combination or a hybrid or some combination thereof. The logistics of if we think about how we did school, we're going to need to be able to be sensitive to people with immune compromised systems, social distancing, masking, sanitation, transportation, food service, recesses. All of those things come under this, and it's huge.
Each school is different. I mean, you've got different size schools from the island schools, Cranberry Island, Frenchboro, which probably will allow easier return because the schools are so small, as opposed to the larger schools when you get into MDI high school, which brings a whole different set of circumstances when you have 460 odd students and all the staff and teachers.
Well, absolutely, Chris. I mean, to suggest that our smallest school, Frenchboro, with 3 students, 8 miles offshore, is the same as our high school with 550 students. When we went into this on March 13th and we closed the schools, I think it's I won't say it's easier, but it made a lot more sense to shut everything down wholesale. But given what we know now and what we're learning and the progress we're making, I don't know if that same standard is going to be able to be applied to every school the same way, and it doesn't make sense to look at it that way. Right now, we're all operating under that protocol. All the schools continue to be closed. That includes gyms and playgrounds. And then people question that. Well, why is that the case if we're opening up restaurants and businesses? And the answer to that is as follows. Restaurants and businesses and those places, those are voluntary. Yes, there are essential things that people have to do, grocery stores, but still, that's something that people elect to do. Public education is compulsory. It's required. And so there's a different standard, and we have to approach it that way. And that's not just MDI, that's public educational entities across the state and nation. So when we look at it through that lens, I think that it can be frustrating for some and confusing, but that's the piece we're working around. Our summer programming right now is going to remain remote. I can tell you that we're not trying to be blockers. We get the fact that we want to be able to be reopening, but the worst thing that we could do is do something that compromises the good work we've done to date or cause a spike in this. So we need to be able to safely ensure that people are healthy, that they can return, they're not going to expose themselves or others. And then if we can do that in a layered approach, that's the plan at this time. I think two things that factor into that will help us, and that is the sooner we can verify testing, antibody testing, and or temperatures to know who's safe and unsafe is going to be a huge indicator, a huge shift for all of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I'm sure there are different scenarios that you're playing around from whether, everybody's going to have temperatures being taken when they return to school. I know that that they've talked about having a sick room. What do you do if all of a sudden a child comes to school and starts to feel ill? The whole idea about, well, you go to school unless you're coughing up a lung or, you're vomiting and things like that. All of that is going to change.
Well, yeah, I think our threshold and our standard is definitely changed. And I think people, my observation is most people are aware of that and sensitive to that. And generally, I think people deserve a pat on the back. They're doing the best they can and they're doing the right things. And we've learned a lot. And I think as long as we continue to follow the guidance of medical professionals, that's the right thing to do. I'm going to be careful as I say this, but it's important. I believe personally, it's important that our government leaders have some continuity. And I think the best thing we can do that is value neutral is to listen to the medical professionals and the medical experts. That to me, the science in this from day one is how I've guided decisions or recommendations I've made. I've not done it on a political structure, and I'm not going down that road. For me, it's about the science and about the health and public safety, keeping politics out of this.
Right. Okay. So that's a lot happening. One of the other things that has certainly come to light in the as school has ended is, and I don't want to say charges, but there have been incidents of racism that have been, and I guess, and I know that Charlie Parker has spoken about it. He's spoken about it very eloquently at the Black Lives Matter rallies in Bar Harbor.
Yes.
That's going to be something that's, I know that you're cognizant of this, but it had to have really come as a big surprise, I think, when it was brought to everybody's attention.
I won't say surprise, Chris. For others, for me, saddened me. I think I can't speak for other people's experiences, but I've been blessed that I've been able to live, travel, work around the planet, and I've been exposed to many cultures, many different scenarios. I try not to live in a bubble, and I try to be aware, and I recognize that we are not a diverse community to the extent of others. The community I came from previously, our high school, we had 53 languages spoken in that school. So it was very different. I was aware of that, but I saw a shift there. And I think the tragedy that's unfolded, the murder of Mr. Floyd and anybody else, is just, it's unspeakable. And it saddens me. And it saddens me to see where we're at as a country. But, you know, as I look upon this too, the hundreds of years and the pain and the struggle seems to all be coming to a head, where my sense is that there is more of an awareness now where people are tired of being tired. And,
Yeah.
you know, you get to the point where enough is enough. I think that's when you start to see real fundamental and systemic change. For some people, my statements on this have been not enough. For those that feel that I have not been sensitive to it or attuned to it, you know, I just would say personally, I don't know what else I can say to ease the pain of people who have been touched by racism, and have been impacted to that. I don't condone it, don't support it, and don't sanction it. To include the violence, the brutality, all of those pieces. Folks have asked me about, you know, why have I not come out and specifically condemned the actions of police or others. So I had a very, I thought, I've spoken to two people about this. One is Tim Bland, resource officer, and the other is Jim Willis. And, you know, my question was, how is the police community responding to this? Because that's really, you know, at the heart of the matter. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not public safety. And so I'm looking to them in terms of how they feel. And Jim really helped me that the Maine State Police Chiefs Association and the Maine State Police and all of those public service got together and they issued a statement. And I shared that statement with some of the students. And if you go onto the Maine Chief of Police Association website, it's a powerful statement. It really speaks specifically and to Mr. Floyd's murder and the role of police and the reform. So, you know, again, I would just say this. I think it's unfortunate that that incident occurred, and my hope is that out of that tragedy, there can be positive movement forward. I will say that for our students, you know, our students and our staff have been very active in many, many areas that we're proud of, whether that be sustainability, green initiatives, and in this case, human rights issue, racism. Those are platforms that we can be proud of, that our students' voice have been heard. What I hope is that there are a lot of questions right now, and there are a lot of recommendations. There are a lot of things that people would like to see us do, and we're committed to listening, and we're committed to working, and we're committed to improving. I do hope, and I'm going to meet actually with the students tomorrow and Mr. Haney, that, and this is not at all to dismiss or deflect, but there's much work that's been done by kids and staff that I want people to be aware of, so they know the things that we have done or are doing. And again, that's not to deflect or minimize. It says, what can we do to say, is this working, and build upon it, or that's not working, and how do we impact teaching and learning? And again, I will say the policy that we put in place around the teaching of sensitive areas, and I think that's going to be very helpful. And I would say the impetus for putting that policy in was to encourage student conversations and facilitate those discussions rather than indoctrinate. So that policy I see as a very positive platform to bring that voice forward.
I know.
The last thing I'll say too, I think that's really important, is I'm really proud of the fact that we now have students representatives on our school board that can speak to both policy and voice in our schools.
one of the things that the students have, I don't want to say demanded, but have put forward is a kind of a reevaluation of the school resource officer.
Mhm.
Now, I know Tim Bland. I've worked with Tim for years, um, and I mean, flat out, I will say that I'm in favor, but of having school resource officers in there, but in schools, but it not as a police presence, or not as a enforcement presence, I guess, but
Yeah.
more as a safety officer. And
I just
we
want to interject, Chris. Our,
yeah,
our our philosophy and approach has never been about enforcement. It has
right.
been about resource and relationship. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I mean we've had this discussions before, you and I, and that we've talked about when this was, I think, probably 3 years ago or so. Um, where is that policy now? Are you looking at that, or where is that being evaluated? Where is the school resource officer um,
Well,
memorandum?
one of the benefits that we have right now in this situation is that we're not in school. And
Right,
so if call it what you will, but we're in a period of we're in a period where we can take a step back and assess, and nobody's in harm's way. I think it's really important, and let me just say that I'm very, very sensitive to how people may feel about uniforms, badges, all of those pieces. It's a nobody. Try really hard, Chris, not to put blanket statements out there, because you
yes,
never know if you're going to offend somebody or how you're going to touch it. But a couple things to think about, and not to shift away from this, but you know, we it's important, I think, to look at an individual in a position too. And as you mentioned, we don't want to focus specifically on Tim or other people in those positions, but it's hard to cast a statement that a position and a person are blended in the same way. Does that make sense?
well,
Because
it does, and I think, I mean, you can say, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you may want to hire a phys ed teacher, but you've got to have the correct phys ed teacher to go into the
and
school.
Chris, I was going to go there but I didn't want to get away from the police thing. But look, I'll just put it on the table. There are firefighters, there are superintendents, there are principals, there are teachers, there are pharmacists, you name it. And there are people that I don't, I think it's rare that people get up in the morning and say, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to do a poor job or I'm going to hurt somebody. I mean, we have to, for the most part, assume good intent, that people have good intentions, they're going to do the right thing. And when they don't do the right thing, short of violence, brutality, those types of things, we have to have systems in place where we can hold people accountable, but make sure that we can also not have resources that may provide some supports be closed off to our schools too. I'll give you the push-pull too, and this is, again, not to minimize, deflect. I don't want to upset anybody, because let me just circle back. Has that come up? Yes, it has. The students have raised it, and I'm confident we're going to be having conversations about that. I'm confident that the community and the board's going to want to look at the policy, and they should. And I also want them to look at the data. They'll look at the monthly reports in every school that Jim Willis provides in terms of what has and has not occurred, how that's happened. Let's look at some testimonials from the
Right.
kids. Let's look at testimonials from the staff. I think we look at all of those and then we make some determinations. I think the worst thing we can do in any situation, and it's not like we're in school tomorrow, the worst thing we could do is make a very quick decision. The decision on resource officers in schools didn't happen overnight. It was a conversation. It was layered. They had utilized that position in Bar Harbor, Connors Emerson schools for many years. So I think this is very complex. There's policy, there's expectation, there's data, and there's certainly the environment that the students and the staff and the community feel comfortable with. Those are the pieces I think that help us make good decisions. But I will say this, it's not something that unilaterally a superintendent or administrator should just impose. That would be wrong on all counts.
Right.
I also would fear that if we were not able to do this carefully, God forbid, the school safety and security pieces, how that may potentially be compromised if we're not careful with how we view this. Because let's not forget, aside of this very, very important issue, less than a year ago, we were talking about how we were going to beef up the safety and security of our students. So it's that constant push-pull, Chris, and making sure that we have balance, and above all, we do the right thing. But I will say, I know firsthand from Matt Haney that there are students that are not comfortable having, and maybe staff, I'm not aware of that, but of having a police officer or individual with a badge and a weapon in a school. I'm aware of that.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt that, I mean, as you said, I mean, when you look at how everything is whipsawed around,
yeah,
from safety and security to COVID-19 to protests and the Black Lives Matters movement. I mean, it's head spinning. And
well, Chris, I think that, one of the things that's been helpful to me is that, yes, the Black Lives Matter movement is very important, but we also don't want to forget what the term I believe is BIPOC, people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, any of those individuals that have been marginalized, hurt, that is important that we consider that in the full context.
Right, and MDI, I mean, has been a leader in that in terms of the transgender movement, with the Pride prom and things of that sort. So
well, MDI has been a leader in that and many other areas, and what I'm encouraged by is that they've always been thoughtful in their dialogue, in their approach, and I have no doubt they'll continue to be thoughtful with this issue. So it's complex, but the bottom line is student voice and community voice is going to be very, very important to this process.
If people want to weigh in, and I know it's been difficult with Zoom meetings and things of that sort, you're open to receiving emails. You're open to chatting with people. Just remind everybody how to get a hold of you.
The short answer is yes, Chris, but I'm missing human contact too, so I would much rather prefer to do it in person. But right. I look forward to that day. But absolutely, yes, people can email me. My address is on the MDI RSS website. It's Marc with a C .Gousse @mdirss.org. There's also a place where people can go and provide commentary to the board. I would also say that we have been conducting our school board meetings remotely and regularly, and we welcome and encourage public comment. And if folks provide that to us in advance, we read it into the record. If it comes in during or after the meeting, we read it into the record the following meeting. So we want that. That's also a plug to say I think people can get a lot of information on this and other important issues by tuning in to those meetings. We're back on our regular schedule. And because of the situation we're in now, with all these important issues, we'll be meeting through the summer.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we can record. This is being recorded. We'll see. And we'll get this up, and we can chat, you and I, throughout the summer as well. Yeah,
Chris, I really appreciate the opportunity. I've missed seeing you. I want to thank you for the platform, and I just have to give a shout out to you, Chris. People may not know it, but you have been, I don't know, you're the schedule you've kept with all the graduations, all the promotional ceremonies. Chris, you're all about the kids, man, and thank you for that. That's amazing. Yeah, you're a special person. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and we had a great time at the MDI graduation, and we thought that we were thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have thunderstorms, which being 2020, it would have only been right.
Right.
And, you know, then it would have been, do we have to wait a half hour? It would have been a mess.
I was
So,
a high school principal for 10 years. I only held one outdoor graduation, and I just skirted in from a thunderstorm. I'm like, I don't know, outdoor ceremonies, usually I attract the weather.
all right. Thanks
Thanks,
very much. We'll chat soon.
thanks, Chris. Take
Thank you.
care. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. I think we got it. How do I stop it? Okay.